We will be replacing the brake master cylinder on our project vehicle. Begin by lining the area underneath and surrounding the brake booster assembly using plastic bags. This will hopefully catch any spilt brake fluid and prevent it from getting onto any of the paint and causing damage. Make sure to wrap the plastic bag around the brake lines and around the brake booster itself. We need maximum coverage for the minimum of spillage. In Hondas, the alternator is located underneath the brake master cylinder. We must also cover it to prevent any fluid from getting inside and causing a fire hazard. Now, loosen off the brake lines. There are two brake lines, one for the front brakes and one for the rear brakes. Loosen them off using a 10mm open-ended spanner. Once the retaining nuts have been fully undone, the hose will pull free, but only when you remove the master cylinder from the brake booster assembly. The threads on the brake line bolts are quite long. Once the lines have been removed, you might find it beneficial to cover the master cylinder and reservoir assembly with a plastic bag to collect any excess spillage. Now, using a 12mm ring spanner, undo the two bolts which are holding the master cylinder onto the brake booster. This is the final part in removing the master cylinder from a Honda. Before undertaking this with a vehicle other than a Honda, I would suggest that you check with a mechanic or the service manuals to ensure that there are no extra linkages inside the booster or master cylinder to be undone. Now we simply pull the whole assembly out and remove the reservoir cap. Remove the filter cartridge from inside the reservoir after draining out excess fluid. Clean the inside and outside of the filter cartridge with a cloth. Once the cartridge is clean, set it to one side. Give the inside of the reservoir a cursory wipe over to soak up any excess brake fluid. Now, using a 10mm spanner, loosen off the hose clamp that retains the brake reservoir to the brake master cylinder. Be careful not to damage the plastic, however it is a very tight fit. Now, using a rag, clean the inside and the outside of the brake fluid reservoir thoroughly. This is essential to stop dirt and contaminants from getting inside the new master cylinder. Now we need to prime the new master cylinder. Remove the gasket over the input shaft. In your master cylinder kit should be a pair of adapter screws and 2 lengths of hose. Screw both screws into the outlet paths on the master cylinder. Then attach the 2 hoses. Now put the hose clamp around the base of the brake fluid reservoir and reattach it to the new master cylinder. Using your 10mm spanner, tighten up the hose clamp to secure the reservoir in place. Be careful not to over tighten so as to not crush the reservoir. Now reinsert your filter cartridge. Using clean new brake fluid, fill the reservoir to the maximum line. Allow time for the fluid to settle in the dry master cylinder. Now, holding the assembly upright, place both hoses inside the brake fluid inside the reservoir. In one smooth motion, push the input shaft in and out. This will blow the air out of the cylinder and draw in the brake fluid. Allow 5 to 10 seconds between each pump to allow the bubbles to settle. You might find that tapping the reservoir aids in knocking the bubbles loose. We need to remove the maximum amount of air from the reservoir, lines and master cylinder before we can mount it. Now that there is no more air in the lines, the master cylinder should be ready to mount in the vehicle. Place the input shaft rubber seal back over the input shaft. Slide the input shaft over the output shaft on the brake booster. Now, line up the bolts with the holes in the master cylinder and slide the entire assembly back smoothly. Using your 12mm spanner, tighten up the bolts that retain the master cylinder to the brake booster. Remove the priming tubes and priming adapters. Insert the brake lines back inside the holes, and then, using a 10mm spanner, tighten up the brake line retaining nuts. Do not tighten them up all the way just yet. Tighten them up finger tight. Have your assistant get in the vehicle and push down the brake pedal until it feels firm, and then hold it there. This will squirt the excess fluid out as well as aid in removing air bubbles from the lines. Whilst they hold it flat, tighten up the brake line retaining bolts. Then reattach the cap, and now flush the entire area with clean water to remove any excess brake fluid which may have spilt on the paint and surrounding areas. Once this is complete, we are ready to bleed the brake lines. You must bleed all 4 brake